Hello, thanks for joining us on platform. I'm Ruth Aguele. Today we'll look at something very critical. You agree with me that there is hardly any society the world over that is completely devoid of one form of conflict or the other. Now, one predominant is boundary disputes, and the phenomenon of internal boundaries and ethnic conflicts and their impacts on nation building, national integration, and socio-economic development is of major concern. No one wants to live in a community where there are disputes over undefined demarcations. In Nigeria, there is scarcely any state that has not been involved in boundary disputes with its neighbors. However, an efficient boundary resolution mechanism is a potent tool for national security. Equity among border communities, both in Nigeria and her neighboring countries, will strengthen economic development and other bilateral relations to engender peaceful coexistence. Now, the National Boundary Commission is strategically positioned to further strengthen coordinated activities to enhance amicable resolution of disputed boundaries. The NBC Act, that is the Establishment Act of 2006, provides that the Commission shall carry out functions to intervene and deal with any dispute that may arise between Nigeria and any of her neighbors, with a view to settling the dispute. Also, intervene and deal with any boundary dispute that may arise among states, local government areas, or communities. But you ask, how effective has border management been in Nigeria, and how well has the Commission been able to achieve its responsibilities? Our focus on the program will be border management, putting the issues into perspective. Our guest is the Director General, National Boundary Commission, Surveyor Adamu Adaji. Thank you very much for joining us, Surveyor Adaji.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have a panelist, but before I introduce our panelists, I'll take you through a brief of Surveyor Adaji's profile. Surveyor Adaji, we know, is the Director General of the National Boundary Commission. He has built years of experience in administrative affairs. He holds a BSc and master's degrees in land surveying and another master's degree in public administration. He's a seasoned surveyor and administrator. He is a member of different bodies. He has worked in the commission in different capacities before he was appointed as a DG in 2020. Surveyor Adaji is a writer with quite a number of publications to his credit. There's a whole lot to his profile, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much once again for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, our panelist on the program today is one of our correspondents here in NTA, Kelvin and Honua here. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, Surveyor, it's a lot of issues when we look at Nigeria's boundary management. We see one dispute or the other between communities or, this state or the other states over boundary demarcation and all of that. Now, you have been in the commission for quite a while before you became the Director General. So if you want to give an assessment, being on top of affairs, how would you say Nigeria is faring, when we look at our border management?
Thank you very much, and my greetings to viewers. Well, the National Boundary Commission was established principally to deal with boundary issues, boundary management generally.
Okay.
Prior to the establishment of National Boundary Commission, we had instances where federal government had to constitute various ad hoc committees to look at issues of boundaries, because boundary issues had been on even before the establishment of National Boundary Commission.
Yeah.
The government thought it necessary and wise to establish a permanent structure to handle boundary issues on a permanent basis, and that was why National Boundary Commission was created in 1987 by a decree before the Establishment Act of 2006. Principally, as you have introduced, the Commission's mandate is to deal with issues, boundaries, both internally and externally with our neighbors. And of course, we know boundaries are a common phenomenon. It's something that we all live with. Even as we are now, you can conceive the idea of the spacing where you are and that of a neighbor. and try to see how a boundary is created. So in the same vein, we have boundaries between communities, local government areas, and of course the states. These are creations of federal government for convenience of administration. Why we have issues on boundaries? Because misconceptions. People misconceive the essence of boundaries. They see boundaries as barriers rather than see boundaries as bridges. And that is the misconception we're trying to correct through our constant dialogue and interface with the communities and enlightenment campaigns all over, for people to really appreciate what boundaries are meant for. They are supposed to be barriers, and it's not in all cases that people of the same ethnic group must be grouped together under the same administrative unit. So boundaries can cut across communities, the same homogeneous community. So people must see and live with boundaries. And the boundaries, of course, within the country are inclusive. It should not be seen as exclusive.
Yes, even for humans, we create boundaries in certain areas of our lives.
Yes.
But when this interest clashes is where the problem is. You want to share with us some of the challenges, communities, border communities face?
Yeah, you see, first of all, some of the challenges emanate from the way some of these boundaries emerged. We inherited colonial boundaries that were dictated to the country by the colonial administrations. And some of these boundaries were arbitrary, cutting across ethnic groupings, homogeneous communities, dividing people on the same people into the different administrative units. So that resistance, the quest to be grouped together, the same ethnic group wanting to be together, or a community wanting to be with their kith and kins, had resulted into agitations for adjustment of boundaries. And we have these issues of population, the growth in population causing a pressure on the land, which of course we know land is static, it's not expanding, and the population is growing.
Yes.
And of course also quest for resources, farmlands, some natural resources along the boundary corridors. So these are some of the things that aggravate issues pertaining to boundaries. But we must also emphasize the fact that these boundaries should not be seen as barriers.
Okay, Kelvin, you want to comment?
Yes, this year particularly has been a busy one for the Commission. A lot of engagements, maybe what to call interactive session and all of that took place this year, between officials of states. You have boundary disputes. You want to take us through or situate the impacts of those engagements on fostering peace in those communities?
Yeah, the Act establishing National Boundary Commission provides that we should have what we call the state boundary committees at the state levels, the local government boundary committees at the local government levels. And as you know, as we have changes in governments, the membership of these committees change. That's why we feel it's necessary that we should interface with them to educate them on their mandates and synergy that's expected between these committees and National Boundary Commission. So we've been meeting to at least educate and sensitize them on these core mandates of these committees and what they need to do to douse tensions on boundaries and how we can relate and cooperate for us to solve issues pertaining to boundaries. That's why we engage the states at zonal levels, try to bring them together. We brainstormed, we informed them of the provisions of the Act and the fact that states are expected to have their state boundary committees and local government committees also established. We've also tried to encourage states to do that because if we have states and local government committees functional and existing, we can synergize with them and see how we can at least cooperate and douse tensions and minimize issues pertaining to boundary management.
And for some time now, we're still having some states having this clash of boundary dispute and all of that. And I know that deputy governors of border states have in the capacity of chairmen of boundary communities. Now, if you want to talk to us about the synergy in terms of their interventions when they have to settle some of these disputes between states, for the local communities. What's the synergy like, and how successful has that been?
Yeah, thank you very much. The Act provides that the deputy governors of states are the chairmen of their various states boundary committees. And it's expected that these committees, if they are functional, they should be meeting from time to time to look at issues pertaining to boundaries. The focus of the states boundary committees mainly are to deal with intra-state, that is, interlocal government boundary cases within their states. That is not to say that they cannot also cooperate with their neighbors and try to have bilateral engagements on their interstate boundaries as well. If there are issues pertaining to interstate boundaries, they refer them to us. We expect that if they can, they should also go on some bilateral discussions with their neighbors to see how they can douse tension and see if they can even have bilateral agreements that they can forward to us. But where they are not able to do that and they forward such to us, we engage the two states, bring them together, discuss, and the method we adopt, unlike previously, whereby we just request the states to forward documents, we study documents and take decisions based on those documents. We create avenues for us to meet with representatives of the local governments and communities under the leadership of the deputy governors for us to look at this issue dispassionately and exhaustively, so that we can at least get the people who are on ground, the grass people, to have the buy-in into our discussions on boundaries. Well, we've been faring well. We've been appealing to some of the states to establish their states and local government committees so that we can properly interact and interface with them to see how we can. But some states are still not quite forthcoming.
Because I was going to ask you just before Kelvin comes in now. I know Yobe and Bauchi are still at loggerhead over boundary dispute. You want to share with us the update on that?
Yobe and Bauchi, of course, they share common boundaries. And the boundary is a boundary that prior to now, the military administrators of the then Bauchi and Borno reached some accords, which we call the Babo Accord, that touched on some part of that boundary.
Okay.
The Fikadalozo sector. It was agreed upon by the military administrators then, and they were able to resolve the boundary. So the remaining sector, which is the sector that is pending, the Napada Fika Aziz, is where we had to come in, and we have gone in to use our mechanism of boundary dispute resolution, engagement of the states and the communities to see how we can douse tension and come to an agreement. Now, what we do, where there are documents for use, we use those documents, because the Act provides that you will resolve these boundary problems or define these boundary problems in accordance with available documents, where there are documents. And like we've always said, some of these documents are not there, and where some of these documents are available, they are very, very ambiguous and a little bit not clear, because these are documents that were repeated to us by colonial masters. They make references to features that cannot be found on ground now. So what we do is we go and incorporate the cooperation of the people. We go on ground and we use what we call the ground to paper. And we've used that principle to get the people now to show us the boundary they have recognized on their own. And we try to see how we can build on that and resolve that. So we'll be able to resolve that between Bauchi and Yobe. And we have even in place more pillars to make the boundary physically visible on ground. And then we are planning to put more intermediate pillars to reduce the gap between the main pillars. And one other boundary that perhaps may be of interest is the Gombe Bauchi, of which recently we have Mr. President commissioning the exploration of the Kolmani oil field. That is the boundary that we have also intervened on, and we have resolved it amicably. And I must commend the states for mustering that political will to ensure that whatever had been agreed as the boundary is sustained.
Okay.
So the issue of demarcation is one of the strategies or a tool that the Commission usually use when you want to determine boundary areas between disputed communities. But I have also observed that the process of achieving demarcation takes a very long time. Sometimes you set up one committee, technical committee, to review the outcome of one committee and all of that. The long period of resolving all of that demarcation issues or exercise, is it not adding to tension already existing in those communities? Can we achieve demarcation faster than currently that we have?
Yeah, thank you very much for that very, very important question. The issue of demarcation is key, because what is demarcation? Demarcation is going on ground to place markers that will show the boundary physically, so that people around the boundary corridor can now know where the boundary is physically. And this is something that is capital intensive. Why we've had delays in the demarcation, one is because of non-cooperative attitude of some of the other communities and some states, and of course positive one. But I must commend this administration, because since the coming of this administration, we've had improved funding, and that's why we have ventured into demarcation. We have currently demarcated the boundary between Katsina and Jigawa, between Enugu and Ebonyi. The boundaries of the FCT are currently being demarcated.
Okay.
Now, why we've had delays in the past is because when we resolve a boundary dispute, we agree that we're going to demarcate, and we allow time. Sometimes we say the Office of the Surveyor Administration should do the demarcation, and they also say lack of funds. But now we have taken the step further of we also going into it in synergy with the Office of the Surveyor Administration. So if they have funds, we partner with it. If we have funds, we also engage them and get it done. So with that, we have commenced a series of demarcations. Unlike before, where we resolve a boundary, we say, okay, this part should be demarcated, and it never get done until so many years afterwards, when we have cost to meet again. I know there's this boundary between Edo and Kogi that had been resolved as far back as 2006. In 2007, a contract was awarded to a contractor for the demarcation. He commenced the demarcation. Shortly after, it was accosted by communities. He was forced to remove all those pillars they had in place. The excuse was that they were not informed, they were not aware of the resolution, and they were not party to it, and they were not accepting it. So we're still engaging, and we have agreed now that we're going to stick to what we have defined as the boundary, and we're making efforts to see how we can get funds to continue the demarcation with proper enlightenment and sensitization of the people and engagement of the people at the highest level.
So there is engagement from what you're saying with the people.
Yes.
So from what you're also telling us, the Commission has the capacity and infrastructure to demarcate this Nigeria's geographical space.
Yeah, that's true. We have the capacity.
Are you deploying new technology?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, we have better ways of identifying these boundaries and defining these boundaries. And what we do is, once the boundaries are resolved, using the documents available, we go on ground and physically trace and demarcate. And we're demarcating with pillars of modern standard and of specific standard. So these pillars are not as they used to be. Hardly can they withstand this withstand the environment and time. So by this time around, we're now using pillars of international standard to demarcate these boundaries that can withstand the test of time. And they are big enough to be visible. And of course, people are sensitized that these are government properties that must not be tampered.
Okay, from what you've also shared with us, you make it seem so seamless when you're talking about settlement of disputes between communities. Now, when the Commission, settle communities over this boundary disputes, does that resolution stays permanent, or do communities go back to the old issue? Share with us some of those experiences.
Yes, you see, that is why we always call on the states to muster that political will to ensure that decisions taken on these boundaries are sustained and maintained. And let me recall one of the discussions with one of our chairmen of the state boundary committees, and may so rest in peace, Architect Bantex of Kaduna State, who now agreed that, look, the states the states have to cooperate and make sure that they sustain whatever agreements we agree on boundaries. There's instances where communities renege on government pronouncement on the status of the boundaries to start fomenting trouble should not be tolerated. Boundaries are not creations of the communities. These are government creations. The federal government decides that this is the boundary between state A and state B, so it shall be. Once it conforms with all the norms and the procedures in the establishment of the boundaries. But for communities to say, no, we are not going to accept, and the government of that state towing the line of that community to refuse to take any action, it should not be really encouraged. So that's why we call on the states to muster that political will to ensure that whatever it is agreed as the boundary between states should be seen as interstate boundaries. The communities along the border corridors may have their grievances, but they must be properly sensitized and enlightened to say this is the boundary. And that boundary is not supposed to be a barrier. It should not stop them from their activities across the boundary.
So if the federal government have given a sanction that is statutorily, why do those states, those communities go back to the issue?
Yeah, and that is why we're laying emphasis on the physical demarcation. Hitherto now, these boundaries are resolved but not demarcated, physical on ground.
Okay.
So we're now taking the step further. And like I said, this government is making resources available for us to carry out this physical demarcation. That's why I said we have committed demarcation of a quite number of boundaries, and we're doing it in conjunction with our sister agency, the Office of the Surveillance Reparation, so that we can make these boundaries very, very visible. The excuses of some of these communities that these boundaries are not physically seen on ground, so they claim that ignorance and perpetrate all kinds of criminal activities.
Encroachment is an offense.
Well, yes. Well, now, the boundaries in Nigeria, like I said, they shouldn't be seen as barriers. Somebody in state A can have activities or properties on state B. So it should be allowed unhindered access to his properties. He can own. But then, if the boundary is clear, if your part of your property is on state B, you should now know that yes, this property is within the jurisdiction of state B. Whatever rules and regulations that govern ownership of property in that state, you adhere to it. It's not to say you want that portion of your land to be annexed to your own state so that it can all be seen as part of your state. This is that controversy that some people don't appreciate, and that's what we try to educate them, to make them appreciate that the boundary is not a hindrance. You can own properties across, but then recognize the fact that this portion of your property is in another state, and you must conform the rules with the rules and regulations of that state as far as ownership of properties in that state are concerned.
We have a situation where after resolving boundary dispute between states or communities, and they accepted the terms, and eventually they renegade and go to court, and the court pronounced otherwise. What kind of challenge does that pose to your commission?
Well, in most cases, when we resolve boundary disputes and people go to court rely on whatever resolution we have arrived at, because the National Boundary Commission is a statutory federal government agency responsible for the definition of those boundaries. Yes, that's why in some cases that are referred to courts are also being referred back to the local boundary commission and get them resolved. But where court, in its wisdom, decides that our resolution has some faults and decides otherwise, we comply as a law-abiding government agency. But before the court decides on that, they must also have evidences that will prove otherwise.
So we have not talked about the role of traditional institution in all of this, because at the community level, traditional law wield a lot of powers and influence, and in resolving boundary dispute and also getting inhabitants of communities to comply, but we think that there should be more specific rules for traditional rulers in all of this.
Yeah, in the northern part of Nigeria, we rely so much on the traditional rulers because they have most of these boundaries emanated from emirate councils.
Yes.
And they are quite familiar with their areas of jurisdiction. You find where we have difficulties in interpreting some of these inherited colonial documents, we resort to the ground to prepare with cost to the people to involve them, and of course they rely on the traditional institutions. So the traditional institutions have great roles to play.
Are they playing those roles?
Yes. Well, the membership of the state's boundary committees include members of the traditional institutions.
Okay.
So they have roles to play, and in most cases, when we call meetings, the officials from the states include representatives of traditional institutions, because we know they are the custodians of our lands and they have great roles to play. So it is only when they tend to want to promote more of the traditional boundaries as against the administrative boundaries.
Okay.
I will try to educate them.
So there's conflict of interest sometimes.
Yes, because some of them prefer to rely on what they see as traditional boundaries. And we've said there's a distinction between traditional boundaries and administrative boundaries. Traditional boundaries can allow a traditional ruler to have jurisdiction over his people traditionally, even though there may be some of them across the boundary on the other side. But we must also emphasize the fact that these boundaries we're working with are the administrative boundaries created by government, specifically for ease of administration and governance. Every state, every local government, every community must have a defined area of jurisdiction, within which you can exercise your rights and privileges and authority. That's why some of the border communities suffer because of the neglect, and I think the neglect may be as a result of the fact that it's not quite clear whether they are part and parcel of that state. That's why the definition of boundaries are quite key and necessary for them to now be properly integrated and be seen as part of that community.
You talked about awareness, sensitizing people at the community level. Is it radical enough? Because if there are conflict of interest where the traditional rulers want their own way of doing things to be done different from the administrative way, how do you achieve success in terms of creating that awareness that is much desired?
Yes, that is one role will be played to the state's boundary committees, local government committees, which we hope to be playing those roles very well. Because, like I said, we have local government boundary committees at local government level, the state boundary committees at the state levels. These are supposed to work in synergy. And of course, the local government boundary committee, which is supposed to be one with the grassroots, is supposed to continuously engage these people and educate them on these issues on boundaries. It is because they are not properly constituted and, in fact, not functional.
Yes.
That will have these cases of incessant boundary misinformation and misconceptions on boundaries generally. So, if they are functional and the people are properly sensitized and enlightened, we try as much as possible to engage them more. We have had cases to organize zonal workshops. We want to still go ahead and do that, and we're encouraging states to also organize states workshops that will include the local government boundary committees at the local government levels and the relevant stakeholders, so that they can discuss issues on boundaries. We do that at national level. We do that at regional level. We expect that states should also do that. So continuously, people should be sensitized on the essence of boundaries.
Okay.
Boundaries should not be seen the way some people say it. It must not be seen that all ethnic groups must be in the same state. It's instances where a boundary line will cut across the compound, cut across the house, put the wife's room in another state, and the husband's room in another state. So these are just for administrative purposes. Yeah. And so if people appreciate, understand that, they can at least now know why they need to cooperate and allow issues of boundaries not to be seen as something that must be do or die and cause bad blood between communities and neighbors who have coexisted for so long. Which
is why sensitization is very critical.
That's
okay, true. We'll continue this conversation just after this break. Stay tuned.
Pleased that the Buhari-led administration has made remarkable progress, like Lafia Transmission Station nearing completion.
Africa does not need charity, but partnerships that will promote the adequate investment
with the cooperation of all.
Sharing firsthand the experiences of reporters on the field as they bring to you weekly the beauty of Nigeria's diverse culture and the economic potentials therein. The Correspondents, development through the eye of the grassroots, showing every Monday at 1:30 p.m. on the network service of the NTA, with a repeat broadcast on NTA News 24 and NTA International. Join us.
Now, what would make someone set out on a journey and not get to his or her destination? Now, imagine the victim who cannot reach out to these responders, who doesn't even have the phone to reach out. Hello, thank you very much for joining us on platform. I'm Ruth Aguela.
And the girl, especially if the girl is a minor, she's not yet 18 years. If she gets pregnant, realize that church girl is sent out of school and the boy is left in school.
Just back to pick the corner.
So how much sensitization is there?
I don't agree. A lot of people are just dead.
Welcome back. We're still talking border management with Surveyor Adaji. Calvin, you're going to pick up the question before the break, so go ahead.
I was going to ask. Recently, I know that the NBC set up a consultative forum between chairmen of state boundaries committees and particularly some states where they share borders with neighboring countries like Cameroon and the Republic. Since the establishment of that forum, can you tell us what has been the fate of that forum? What activities, take us through the activities so far that have been achieved?
Yeah, as you know, the mandate of the Commission includes intervention on international boundaries. And that's why we also have issues that border on international boundaries. And one of the things we've realized is to see how we can create that confidence building between us and our neighbors. Okay. We've seen that can really help to cope issues pertaining to insecurity, banditry, and influx of all kinds of criminal activities. That's why we created this forum to encourage the border states to interface with their neighbors across, so that they can at least engage, create that synergy and understanding and confidence building, for them to have understanding and sensitization of their people commonly, so that they see themselves as one and they cooperate in terms of information dissemination and at least trying to see how they can douse issues of boundaries. Okay. Because we've always realized the fact that our African boundaries, generally, international boundaries, which were bequeathed to us by the colonial masters, were artificially drawn. That's why I have instances where you have the same people caught by the boundary, same people on the Nigerian side, people on Niger side. So on Nigerian side, we have people who have actually share so much in common with our people on our own side. So we try to create that forum to as a formal communication avenue between us and them, so that we can meet frequently, exchange views and information that will help.
Have you done any of those engagements so far since the commission of that forum?
Yes, we had it at the national level, that concept. We've gone to Borno to see how we can sensitize the states of Adama, Yobe, Taraba, and Borno itself, to see how they can have that buy-in. And we have encouraged them to also see how they can sensitize their local people at their local government levels, to see how they can also engage their counterparts on the other side, to create that informal relationship. Not minding the fact that there's a boundary, but at least that relationship that had existed before the colonial master came and defined the boundaries reactivated. And also to be conscious of the fact that the boundaries are there. People as they come into Nigerian side, they must follow the rules and regulations governing stay in Nigeria. And as we cross over, but this kind of interface will help to douse tension and create harmonious and seamless ways of relationship between us and them.
Yeah, not just for Niger, the West African region. Is Nigeria's border space secured?
Yes, well, it's secured because our security agencies are trying their best to be sure that they are secured. The areas we have some little frictions are where the boundaries are not quite clear. Recently, there was a time we had a kind of face-off between the security personnel of Nigeria and Benin. And just about 2 weeks ago, we had to engage the Beninese along the Kwara State sector for us to see how we can create that trans-border cooperation. So we invited them down to Kosubosu, the headquarters of Barotin local government of Kwara State, where the people came. We met, we exchanged, we discussed, and of course revived that cultural link between them, because of course they are the same people, but only people on the other side and the side, and they relate very well. Some of them will say their origin is even from Benin. So we try to create a venue whereby they can have a formal way of at least interacting, and that will help. And we've also emphasized the fact that it's important that we must define the boundaries so that security forces on both sides will know their limits. But because you don't know the limits, you don't know where to patrol up to. And if you don't get to where should be the limit, and the other side does not get to where should be the limit, then you create a kind of ungoverned space where criminal activities.
Maybe because there are no physical demarcations.
And that is why. So
is there plans by the Commission to create such?
Yes, we are engaging our neighbors. Currently, with as you are aware, Nigeria-Cameroon, which was decided by the International Court of Justice, is being currently demarcated. We have in place over 2,000 pillars so far, where we still have some few pillars to in place. We are making efforts to in place them. So just to make sure that the boundaries are quite clear and distinct and identifiable by everybody. Within Niger, like I said, we have a very cordial relationship with Niger, perhaps because of the homogeneous nature of the people along the boundary corridors. And that we're trying to cement by trying to create this this consultative fora that will engage Nigerians and their neighbors across the boundary with Niger to see how they can cooperate and relate very well and promote that peaceful coexistence. With Niger, the boundaries, the pillars are there. We are currently replacing those colonial pillars that were in place so many years back that have been defaced and some of them removed. We are trying to replace them with standard pillars that can be very visible. We have gone quite a while. Recently, we just got back from a field work where we emplaced about 40 or so more pillars. So we're doing that to make sure that it's visible. With Benin, we have some little hitch and we're trying to overcome that. And that's why we said, okay, let's see how we can promote that cordiality and take advantage of the homogeneous nature of the people on both sides.
I'm just curious. Kelvin wants to ask a follow-up question, and I have a follow-up with this issue you're talking about. Okay. Just out of curiosity, if we have to use the modern pillars to demarcate all sides of Nigeria, what's the numbers?
What will you be looking at? The kind of figure we'll be looking at?
Yeah.
Well, you see, the boundary between Nigeria and Benin is about 750 kilometers in length. A very long stretch. But these pillars are not just placed, it's not like a wall.
Okay.
So you put pillars at some intervals. What we do mainly as we traverse the boundary, where there are, if it's a long stretch, we put one pillar and put the next pillar on that stretch. Then when the boundary changes direction, we put another pillar at the point it changes direction. Once we make sure first we start by putting pillars at the turning points. If it's a straight line, we put pillars. Then there are instances where you have pillars that are as far apart as 10 kilometers, which is very wide. So we're then trying to see how we can reduce the number of pillars with the main pillar. And we're introducing intermediate pillars. In some cases, about 500 meters apart, 200 meters apart, depending on the density of the population along that. So where the boundary is cutting across communities that are densely populated, we reduce the number of pillars for people to see and appreciate the boundary. If you find places where you find pillars just in the market, in the middle of the market, a market that is just the same market. We have such cases in Nigeria on our boundary with Benin. When we're tracing the boundary, we describe that some pillars are right in the front of some people's stores in the market. People relate, You have a place where
there's this communal
yes,
relation.
the people, perhaps the ruler or traditional ruler is from Nigeria on Nigerian side, but the community is spread even up to the Beninese. So these pillars are many. For Nigeria, Benin, we have about 750-kilometer stretch. So you can imagine if you have to put these pillars at about 5 kilometers apart.
Wow.
How many pillars do you put? For Nigeria and Niger, which is about 1,500 kilometers in length, and also imagine, its colonial masters in place about 48 pillars previously, and that's not really it's far inadequate. And of course, Nigeria Cameroon is about over 2,000 kilometers stretch.
Yes.
We have in place more than 1,000 pillars so far.
Okay.
And we're still in place more.
I want us to stay with that issue of example. We have achieved a lot with the Cameroon aspects of the border. Perhaps because we have a Nigerian Cameroon joint border commission or committee.
Yeah.
What has been the activities of this committee? Can we also replicate that with other neighboring countries?
You recall that the creation of the Nigeria Cameroon Mixed Commission.
Yeah, Mixed Commission.
It's the creation of the presidents of Nigeria and Cameroon under the auspices of the United Nations. And it was principally to see how they can execute the rulings of the International Court of Justice amicably. So we have similar committees, not in that form. We have the Niger Joint Commission, which is also supposed to be at least a collaboration between the two nations.
And the functions are similar.
And under that joint commission, we have what we call the Standing Committee on Redemarcation of the Boundary. That's the technical aspect. And we've been working hand in hand with them to see how we can retrace the boundary and replace the pillars with modern standard. And the cost is borne by the two nations together. Sometimes we do get assistance from some friendly agencies like the German International Corporation.
Okay, and one fact that has resonated all through this conversation is the fallback to the Colonial Masters document. We have the Establishment Act, talking about the Commission's Establishment Act 2006. Any plans for a review so we don't keep falling back to the colonial era?
Why we can't do without looking back to the colonial era is the fact that some of these documents that we're working with were documents we inherited from them. Now, and in most cases, because some of the documents we use are some documents that dated back to 1906, 1910, 1936, 1954, even before independence. And these are still the documents we rely on and use in a definition of boundaries.
We can't do away with it.
No, we're doing away with them now because as we're beginning to re-establish those boundaries in accordance with the documents available.
Okay.
We will define them and gather them, and now they become fresh documents that is going to be a creation of Nigeria.
So there are plans to review the Act?
Well, the Act, as it is now, is okay. We're working with it. Some people are saying they require that the Act be amended so as to give us more powers. We have all the powers. Now,
it's one thing to have documents to be adhered in place. It's another to have effective implementation.
Yes.
So maybe that's where people's concerns are.
I think the area of concern is whether how effective are we in enforcing our resolutions. And I've always argued that yes, our Act says define the boundary. Once we define the boundary, adherence to respecting that boundary is another function of another agency, the security forces, because we've said this is the boundary. If some people want to foment trouble because they don't want to recognize the boundary, there should be other agencies whose mandate should be to make sure that these people do not cause any breach of this by wanting to resist what government has said that should be the boundary. As is, where's the boundary? And that's why we say we don't dabble into issues of resources along the boundary corridors. There are agencies that are supposed to manage resources. Ours is to show the boundary. Once we say this is the boundary, whatever resources that there exist along the boundary corridor, whatever they fall, the agencies that manage them will manage them.
But do you also cooperate with security agencies? Because we get to see, not just for borders, a lot of government infrastructure are being, vandalized.
Yeah.
Now, these pillars, you talked about modern technology of these pillars. Are they being vandalized?
Yes, they are being vandalized by communities who choose to be mischievous. To want
Do you
to
work with security agencies?
Yes, we do work with them because we have the cooperation of the police. Of course, even membership of the board, the commission, provided that the Inspector General of Police is a member of the commission. The National Security Advisor is a member, and the Minister of Defense. So these are all security agencies that are quite key. The National Security of NI is a member of the board. These are nice to show that yes, the work of the board can't be without these security agencies and their cooperation. And they have been quite key and cooperative. Because apart from the commission as a board, we have the operational committees, the internal boundary trial committee and the internal boundary trial committee and the international boundary trial committee. And membership also include some of the security forces. These are the operational committees.
Okay.
For the international, we have the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs as the chairman.
Okay.
For the internal, we have the Honorable Minister of Works as the chairman. Okay. And of course, other members include people, representative of the Commissioner of Police, not below the rank of the Commissioner of Police.
Okay.
And so if there are issues of security, they do assist and make sure that they are adequately provided.
Okay. Yeah, with all of this work that your commission have put in place, are there specific disputes area that you think in the next few months can easily be resolved, or you can add to those ones that have already been resolved?
Well, we have a few flash.
We're giving you a timeline.
A flash point boundaries that we're looking at. Like you've always known, this boundary resolution of these boundary disputes are not as simple as they may seem, and not as because it requires the cooperation of the states and the communities.
Yeah.
We have been on some flashpoint boundaries, which we have been on for quite a while, and we're still making efforts. I'm sure you may recall the boundary problem between Cross River and Ebonyi. It's one that had reoccurred a long while. The one between Benue and Ebonyi. The one between
Rivers and Bayelsa.
So there are a few of them that are still there and very, very, very naughty and thorny, and we're trying to see how we can engage the states more. And like I said, some states are not quite cooperative. The core committee, but we recently resolved, by the board of the commission resolved that boundary commission's work is straightforward and is provided as in the act.
Okay.
So where some states deliberately refuse to want to cooperate, we cannot, it's not deter us. We should go ahead and do our work, provided we can define and defend whatever we do.
I'm just curious here. You talked about the committee very briefly now because we're winding down.
Yeah.
You talked about the committee that has the security agencies involved and states involved. So if they're not cooperating, does it have anything to do with legal representation? Do you have from the judiciary sector?
Yes.
Okay.
So
they can bulge.
That's true.
Okay.
Well, we've not had cause to want to take any state to court or anything.
Okay.
But of course, some states have taken us to court, and we've of course we've had cause to make appearances, and cases are heard, and in many of the cases we've been adjudged to be fair and equitable in the discharge of our duties. So where states are aggrieved, they approach courts. Courts will rely on what we do, and of course we have to prove what we do. So we rely on documents.
Okay.
And these documents, like you said, may have to refer to colonial documents, in addition to the ones we are generating.
Okay.
As a result of the creation of, when states were created, they relied on some of the inherited boundaries of provinces, divisions, to arrive at the new creations. And when further states creations are made from states, we say some local governments. And as it is in most of the states, the local government boundaries are not quite clearly defined. So when a state is created from another state, and they say local government A, B, C, D should form a new state, the problem that used to be while they were together as a state will now metamorphose into interstate boundary problem.
Okay, so on final note, you are a certified surveyor, administrator. You have seen it all when it comes to surveying in Nigeria and all of that. So What is your vision? You know, what do you want to see as part of your legacies if Nigeria's border space must be secured going forward? How do you want the people to understand the importance of these boundaries?
Well, first of all, we need to emphasize on the physical demarcation of these boundaries, and also to put more efforts in sensitization and enlightenment campaigns. And we also want to call on us partners, the states and local governments, to at least cooperate with us and cooperate so that we can at least put hands together and work as a team to ensure that we bequeath to Nigeria well-defined and demarcated boundaries that people can respect and appreciate. And of course, people should be properly sensitized to know that boundaries should not be seen as barriers. And it's not in all cases that boundaries must be in tandem with their their traditional understanding of boundaries.
Okay.
Boundaries are for administrative convenience. It's just to show limits of the decisions of various administrative units. So if people are properly sensitized and we go the extra mile to make sure that these boundaries are well defined and demarcated, I think without session, people will get to appreciate and understand them with time.
All right, I'm afraid that's where we'll leave the conversation, but we'll definitely leave that job of sensitizing the people on your purview as the head of the commission.
Yes, and we want to count on the NTA also to partner with us in getting that message across.
We're already doing our part.
That's good.
Thank you very much, Surveyor Adamu Adaji. He's the DG of the National Boundary Commission. And our panelist, Kelvin Ehunuahe, a correspondent here in NTA. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, we've been talking boundary management, putting the issues into perspective. These are just boundaries, not barriers, as it's been clearly stated. We want to live peacefully as one people, one nation, with common interest of socio-economic growth. I'm Ruth Aguele. That's Platform. Bye.
NTA, you can't